Hi, Diane. I'm so happy you're here. And my first question has to be, what are attachment styles from a somatic perspective?
Okay, well, thank you, Marina. It's great to be here. Well, gosh, I'm so wedded to somatic and relational together. They're like a marriage made in heaven. So we bring everything into the relational experience or experiential work in general, because I feel like people really learn and heal that way. And then, of course, really embodying it somatically is super important.
Mm.
So your first question covers a lot of ground. I'll pause in between for you to comment, but the main thing is I've been working with Peter Levine for 40 years, and we still work together. And I taught somatic experiencing for about 35 of those years. So I'm, all over the world. And so I'm deep in the somatic perspective for sure. Uh, and what I noticed working so much with nervous system regulation and physiology and all that so deeply important and facilitates healing so wonderfully, there was something that just seemed to be tricky for people, even when they were recovering and resolving their trauma histories, was that there was this feeling of broken connection. Like it was hard for them to really deeply connect to their authentic self, and sometimes to be open to feeling safe in connection with other people, which connection with others is highly regulating. So it's an important part of who we are as humans. So I got really maniacally focused on attachment work and how, from the very beginning, like where's that blueprint start in utero and beyond. And so much of it happens before we even have an ego structure to talk about it, that it's implicitly encoded in the way our brain is primed to respond, the way our nervous system is primed to respond to threat or to connection and safety. So looking at it from a somatic perspective is really deeply embedded in how I think about it and how I work with it. And there has been so much out on attachment for a long time, but what I really tried to kind of hone in on was, how do you clinicalize it, or how do you put it into practices that people can actually do that affect their sense of safety in relationship and connection. So that's kind of what my work's been focused on for a very, very long time now, is how to help all of us as practitioners, but also all of us as on the healing journey. We're all in the same boat in that regard. How do we actually turn our awareness and understanding into some kind of practice that actually shifts our attachment more towards a secure attachment?
That's funny you said secure, because I'm like, okay, let's start with what is secure attachment. And people say it's 51% of the population, and I just have a really hard time believing that. But
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm like, where are all those people? I guess, they're not the people that end up in my office as much, although people have different problems than just attachment, to challenge themselves with. But it just seems to me, first of all, the attachment system's really forgiving if you help it heal. And I love what John Bowlby really expressed so beautifully, that it's part of our biology. Just like we have a nervous system, we walk around with a brain, thank God, and we walk around with a secure attachment system, but a lot of it can get interfered with by different things. I mean, caregiving patterns for sure, but also, medical procedures for moms and dads and babies. And it could be born in a war zone. It's going to affect it. So it's not just parenting, but I tend to focus on that because that's the window that a lot of people mostly relate it to. But it is more than that. Yeah. So secure attachment is a really big bonus if you were grown up in a pro-social family, that where you felt safe, you felt held with whatever arose in your experience, you were reflected in terms of your emotional states or whatever was going on with you inside your little body as a child. Somebody sat down and go, oh, I can see you feel really sad right now. Your friend from kindergarten didn't include you in their birthday party. I'm really sorry. This way of reflecting helps us kind of learn our emotions and our emotional expression, and that it's okay. And usually in a securely attached family, safety's there. There's a sense of protection. There's a sense of safety. There's a freedom from harm. And there's also this ability to repair. Misattunements naturally happen in life. And it builds resiliency as we overcome them and come back together after a misattunement. And secure families know, okay, something's off. Let's address it. Let's repair it. Let's, move forward with it. With an intention not to make that mistake again if it can be avoided. I mean, John Gottman's research, which is so valuable, he says that if you learn to receive and initiate repair, it gives you a 85% chance of sustainable well-being in your relationship. So if you don't take anything else away from today, learn how to repair and learn how to receive repair, even if people don't do it particularly artfully. Just feel the intention and allow people to repair with you. That's a really big part of secure attachment.
Mm.
Yeah. So, people that are securely attached don't have stress on connecting, like approaching to connect. They don't have stress on being autonomous and moving into their alone space. They stay tethered, they're connected, they stay in communication. They respond. Another word from a research point of view with secure attachment is consistent responsiveness. So it's like, if you text a friend and you're asking them something really sensitive and they don't get back to you for 3 or 4 weeks, you're kind of like hanging, like, oh my God, doesn't feel so good. Or maybe they never get back to you. I have friends that aren't so good on responsiveness. I love them anyway, but I know to learn and not take it personally. They're just busy. But really, just even sending a thumb or an okay or a heart or something is all it needs to have that feeling of responsiveness is really important to sustain secure attached relationships. Yeah, that it's okay to ask for your needs, whatever arises in your experience, whether it's grief or joy or exuberance or pain or anguish, whatever's there, that's a hallmark of secure attachment too. And having a good patterns around comings and goings. The attachment system's really sensitive to togetherness and separation. So, like when you're coming home from the end of the day, if somebody doesn't work at home these days and they're actually coming home, when they enter, the person, maybe the other partner's there or the kids are there, if they just sort of stop what they're doing and do an actual greeting, an actual hugging home, that's really important. That really feeds the attachment system. And the same thing if you're going to be gone on a business trip or a vacation, just to say, hey, I arrived safely, I'm good, I'll be back at this time, that time. Just letting the attachment system sort of know when you're coming and going. Comings and goings are just little rituals that you can have, even like going to sleep. I have friends, I love their ritual. They both love chocolate truffles. And they buy, how you can get 6 million different varieties of those. They'll buy special different ones, and every night they have this truffle ceremony sort of or habit to one of them goes to bed early and one of them goes to bed late, but they have an agreed upon time. It's like 9 o'clock at night or something, and they debrief the day and they see if they've stepped on each other's toes or there's just information they want to give to each other, and they share their truffle, and one goes to sleep and the other one goes off and does their evening activities that they're used to doing. So just having kind rituals instead of like getting up in the morning, cooking breakfast together, walking the dog together. That's another nice ritual versus just getting up and getting on your phone right away. And you're basically seeing your partner's the back of their phone more than their face. We sometimes have to use our phones, of course, but having devices can also be divisive. And the attachment system, they say even if you have your phone turned off like mine is and it's face down on a dining room table and off in a corner or something, it still reduces intimacy by 35% just with the feeling that somebody could take a call in the middle of your conversation.
Yeah, it's so good. An interruption to connection, right?
Yeah. And it's so easy just to put your phone in a basket at the door or something. You don't have to be on your phone all the time. Most of us don't really have to be on our phone all the time. I'm not on my phone after 3 o'clock most days.
Oh, wow. That's early. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, because I get an energy dip around 3 and I'm like, okay, occasionally I'll pick it up again. But if somebody texts me after 3, most likely I won't see it till the next morning. I don't feel like I have to look at it. I'm not wedded to my phone like it seems to be relatively normal these days.
It is normal. So what I'm hearing from you is kind of like a flow. Like there's like smooth, flexible flow of like getting together, separating, working through like the repair. All of that is in flow.
Yeah. And the more we develop those skills, even if we weren't raised with it, we can learn those skills. It's highly learnable, secure attachment skills. I can help people. That's a big part of what I'm teaching and what I'm writing about and all of that is just how do you practicalize this understanding of what will nourish the attachment system? Because having really healthy relationships, whether they're friendships, especially our intimate partnerships and our parenting, it's a huge part of life. Really feel like if everybody could get on board with learning secure attachment, including like heads of corporations and heads of governments and all that stuff, oh my gosh, we could have an amazing shift in 1 or 2 generations. So I'm
Yes.
putting that information out as much as I can. Let's go for it. Not a lot of people, not everyone's interested, but it'd be great if they were.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And do you feel like it also changes our relationship even with money, like things that are things, not humans too?
Haven't thought about, I mean, I think money's another whole topic. Money's energy, and you may learn how to be in flow with finances. And I think it takes some educating people to understand that money's an energy, and also just what is practical with finances. I think that should be taught in high schools. I flew back on, I guess a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago. I was on a plane. I sat next to someone, and in the state of Illinois at that time, hopefully still is true, it was required that personal finance was taught to seniors.
Wow. That's
How to do mortgages. They gave them a budget, an imaginary budget, and they had them interview their families, how much they spend on clothes and food and everything. And these kids came out the other side going, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea things were so expensive." And they learned how to do mortgages. They learned how to do budgeting. And then so they weren't just set off into the world with I don't know. I just thought, no, it should be universal. If parents don't take it on, I mean, my sister was great because she had both of her kids take a course in personal finance after they graduated college or high school. I can't remember which one, but anyway, she had them take a special course on it. I think it's just important knowledge. I mean, it's practical. So in terms of attachment and money, I think that's an interesting question. I have to think about that a little bit. I'm sure there's some impact on it because, for one thing, avoidants tend not to be super expansive, so they might be a little bit more frugal, and maybe that's useful. Maybe sometimes it's too much that way. And ambivalence, I'll explain the attachment styles in just a minute, but ambivalents tend to feel like they have to give a lot to get a connection, to try to rein the connection in. So
yes.
Be overspending, possibly. I mean, it could affect money in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe we can share those categories for people.
Yeah. So I talked a little bit about secure. The main idea of this whole thing, in my mind, is when we go to the insecure parts of ourselves, you can have a mix of attachment styles. I think I have a fair dose of all of them, so I can speak from personal experience on all of them. But you're basically learning how to work with your particular attachment injury and in a way that's healing, and then that's to move you closer and further and further towards secure attachment. And once we land more and more in secure attachment, a lot of the injuries healed, so we aren't even in that category anymore, or we might at moments of stress reactivate it. But if we have learned a lot or really healed into secure attachment, it's a foundation that serves us the rest of our lives. So it's a really and not that hard to do. I mean, it will bring up some vulnerability, shifting some of these things, but they are shiftable. So I guess it's a message of hope that I'm trying to say. So if we move to the insecure categories, there's 3 of them. People write about them with different names, but the most commonly used for avoidant is avoidant, and the adult version is dismissive. So as a child behavior, it's considered avoidant, and people come by their attachment deficits or their attachment injuries. Honestly, it's really how they internalized what happened in their caregiving experience or when they were born. Like they had birth trauma, that's going to influence. There's medical conditions influence other things. But you can have 3 siblings and they internalize the family dynamics very differently depending on when they were born and what the exact circumstances were. So we're really dealing with how we internalized it, right? But typically, if someone adapts to avoidant, I would just want to say all of these patterns are survival based. So in the beginning, because they start all the way in utero, right? Really early, before we have an ego structure to tell a story about it or think about it or create, any kind of structure in our minds about it. So because it happens on such an implicit level, the non-conscious level, it's often kind of ruling things from behind the scenes without our even understanding why we have knee-jerk reactions to certain circumstances. So I think understanding it, like bringing that to light compassionately, is really helpful. And one of the things I love about it too, if you're thinking about other people's attachment styles that you might be close to, it helps you not take things so personally, and also to understand what's going on with them with a lot more compassion. So you avoid a lot of conflict and a lot of upset and a lot of, self-blame or blaming others kind of activity, which I think is always a good a good thing. So the first one with avoidant, people tend to adapt to that if there's no presence, like a parent still dealing with whatever, they're kind of dissociated, disconnected. They just don't have any sense of presence. So your little baby reaching out and there's like nobody's home. That's terrifying because we really need a caregiver. We need moms, dads, mom and dads, whatever, grandparents, elders, siblings, whoever's in that role. We really need that person. So if they're not present, that's really scary. The other way it can set up is the caregiver, or the mothering presence, some people say, is really negative and rejecting and kind of hateful eye contact and maybe even contempt. That's really relationship killer. That's really, really hard on little ones. And then the third way it can set up is a parent or is present, but they're only present in left brain activities like teaching kids the alphabet or teaching reading and writing and arithmetic, or teaching how to ride a bike, but they aren't present emotionally, and attachment really relies on the right brain. So the left brain's getting fed all these skills and intelligence and everything, but the right brain is not getting any kind of emotional reflection or nuance or, yummy kind of huggy, touchy kind of yummy stuff. So the other thing I want to say is that some babies are born with maybe a condition or something where their attachment system's not very active. Like they're pretty passive. They don't reach out. They don't coo. They don't initiate attachment gestures. And that can also impact the parent's response, they're like, the child's not responding. They're not smiling. They're not gooing. They're not looking. They're not reaching. That will sort of stunt a little bit the attachment impulses from the parent. So there's, this can happen from both sides, right? It's important to understand that. Anyway, once someone has felt like relationship isn't nourishing, like I'm either nobody's there or it's negative, it's only neglect or reject, think of it like that, or I'm only getting left brain, then a child naturally, again, from trying to survive the situation, will try to adapt to the deficit of the caregiving situation, and they'll kind of go back on like, okay, I have to do it all myself, and it's safer, and I feel better when I'm alone than when I'm in relationship. And this isn't even a cognitive decision, it's like a physiological reality. So they adapt to, they might have superficial friendships or they might have one night stands, but to do a long-term intimate thing is much more challenging, feels really vulnerable, and everything in them says it's not going to be good. Asking for a need feels like taking a huge risk because needs weren't acknowledged or responded to. So if secure attachment is consistent responsiveness, avoidant is consistent non-responsiveness from the relationships one's exposed to as a child. So there's no expectation. It's like, it'd be like, I don't know, if you went to Vegas and you never got any win, you never got anything back. At some point it would stop being even interesting, right? Just like, I don't want to do this anymore at all. And so we're trying to, the avoidance stance, you don't have to have every aspect of avoidant, but these are some of the qualities of avoidant. They just turn their attachment system off. They put the brake on it. But I just need to help people understand when people are shut down or not responding relationally, that takes a huge amount of energy because you're stopping a major instinct. I think of it as an instinct. If it'd be like you trying to turn off thirst or trying to turn off hunger, or for some people trying to turn off their sexual drive. It's a strong part of us. So to disconnect it, to put the brakes on against it is hard. And then lifting those brakes feels really, really vulnerable. Like it might not feel that vulnerable to somebody who's used to connection, but when somebody who's not, and that connection is really feels like it's not a good place to go, that's super vulnerable. So we want to just honor that and try to do things in our relationships, or whether we're therapists or we're not therapists, just how we respond can make a really big difference for how somebody can surface from that shutdown.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the avoidant, and it sounds like moving closer to connection is very, very terrifying.
Yeah, there's stress on approach. So whether they're approaching someone or someone's approaching them. And a lot of times if you have a really intimate time with someone who's avoidant, close goes to ghost. I mean, it's like you have this really close time and you're thinking, oh, wow, this person's amazing. I had this really close, amazing, intimate thing. And then you don't hear from them for 3 or 4 weeks, you know? If you don't understand that, it's really easy to take that personally, right? Like, oh my God, what happened? Or did I say something wrong? Or what's wrong with them? Or, all this stuff. But if you understand what would be better to say to someone if you understood attachment would be like, I know we had this really, really close evening and I loved it, but I also know that you might need to take some space now. So just know that I'm still here and you can take your space.
Mhm.
That would be kindly acknowledging the attachment injury, but in a way that isn't blaming or, like, now I know you're just going to never talk to me again. There's ways to be with it, right? Where you're kinder. And when somebody feels understood, like you can feel that for yourself and I can feel that for myself. When I feel really understood, then it's much easier for me to make contact again. Oh,
Mhm.
okay, they get it. They understand me. They understand I need to like have some alone time now. Okay. So yeah, I don't feel like I have to like make a big deal out of having a lot of alone time. I'm like, okay, I kind of feel like connecting now. It makes everything less bumpy if you
Yeah.
understand it. You come at it with kindness instead of, you know, anger or rejection.
And I love that you're saying that because I think there's a tendency for a lot of us to think that we change our patterns by shaming them. I mean, we don't actually think that, but we think, well, I'm going to make them really wrong and then they'll change. But
Right.
the more we validate it, like, oh, this is what my system needs right now, then it becomes easier to actually heal and gradually do the opposite, like come closer, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and the biggest challenge is to help an avoidant feel that relationships are nourishing, to like meet a need or even like say they're struggling with something, their car broke down or something. Just say, hey, I'll be there. I'll get AAA. I'll call AAA for you. Just whenever you can fulfill a need because they're not used to that. They've used to doing everything themselves because they don't think anybody can do it as good as they can do it. So they don't often have a really well worked out support system because of that. But gosh, going through life with support is way better for all of us. So there's the gift of the avoidant is that they tend to be very developed on the left brain, so they can be great teachers. They have all sorts of skills. They get the job done at work because they're not distracted by the emotional issues of the team or other people going through stuff. They're just like, oh, whatever, that's fine. I just got to get the job done. So they're highly productive. I mean, the world needs that, right? They're highly productive. But what we're trying to do when we go back to secure attachments, have both. Have the productivity of the avoidant, but also the ability to connect and enjoy the nourishment of a relationship. It's a big part of life.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the anxious ambivalent one.
Anxious ambivalent is very different. The way they have again from survival, they have adapted. Their early upbringing is different. So the upbringing usually involves parents that are actually a lot more clued in. They're actually giving love and support, but they're doing it in a way that's highly inconsistent. So they have inconsistent responsiveness, which inconsistency generates a lot of anxiety for most people. They just don't know, like, okay, I get love doing this now, and then I do the same thing tomorrow, and it's not there. It's just like, well, like a moving target. They, like as Stan Tatkin says, they knew Eden, they knew the good Garden of Eden, but then they feel like they're continually getting cast out. It's too much of the time, right? So then there's this thing that happens where the avoidant is very focused on self because they don't experience other as being useful at all, right? But the ambivalent is opposite. They're like so trying to get the other, whoever the other is, could be somebody at work, could be their partner, could be their child, whoever other is. They're trying to get that relationship in place so desperately that they disconnect from themselves. They always have a fear of abandonment, but the truth is they've already abandoned themselves, right? Because they're all their energy goes to someone else. I do this exercise sometimes when someone's in my office. I've done it occasionally online too, but I'll say, okay, I want you just to go inside and really experience the Susie-ness of Susie or the Tom-ness of Tom or whatever, and just really get a feeling of you, because that's what they don't have a strong sense of, and to really develop that sense of self. And then I just want you to open your eyes to the point you see the tips of my shoes, and then as soon as they see the tips of my shoes, like they experience that another person's in the room, all their energy goes to
Yeah. When I guide people in somatic practices, I say, okay, now open your eyes and look at something pleasant and then actually like feel your body. Like even if they're looking at a tree,
Right.
Used to find that so hard. Like I just wouldn't feel anything anymore. I was just like, oh, tree, person. And yeah, it's so fascinating. It's like a body, it's a felt sense that you have to work on.
Exactly, exactly. And so then I'll have them, go back inside again and say, okay, let's go back to Susiness or Tomness or whatever and feel yourself again. And then I have them just do this toe thing to acknowledge that I'm in the room and then stay with themselves and be able to connect to someone else eventually. So this first it's just staying with self because that's unfamiliar territory. And then it's like, how can I not lose myself when I'm also feeling the presence of someone else.
Mhm.
That's a big healing experience for the ambivalent. And they need a lot of reassurance because they're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, okay, you're here for me every Tuesday as a, body worker or therapist or caregiver or something. But what about next week when you're on vacation? Or they're always looking for the yes, but like, okay, yeah, you're being kind to me, or you just made me my favorite dinner. But what about tomorrow? They're always like dissing. They don't realize they do this, by the way, but they do it. They kind of negate any caring behavior because they're defending against what they feel is certain that they're going to be dropped. And they had the being dropped thing. They came by it honestly. It happened enough in their childhood that they're just sure it's going to happen again. So saying things like, "Oh, you're my guy," I hold you in my heart, or "You're my gal," and you're my special person. I love you above all else, or something. It just really communicating stability and connection can really relax the overactivation of the attachment system. So one is the attachment system shut down. Ambivalent anxious is the attachment system is jacked up on steroids. So it's like the right brain, going wild, like a lot of emotional volatility, a lot more emotional uh, expression, a pressure to speak. A lot of what people don't understand, you kind of have maybe some friends or relatives that you can't get a word in edgewise, sort of. Um, that pressure to speak comes from this uh, ununderstood survival idea that if I keep talking, I'll keep the connection. And
Mhm.
sometimes they're talking about nothing, or they're talking in a way that you can't even follow it. It's like, who are we talking about? What's the point here? What are we talking about? You get lost because there's so many words. And the opposite is true for avoidant. They say so few words, you don't know what's going on. You're sort of feeling like you're pulling words out of them. They have this economy of words. But the
Yeah.
opposite is true for the anxious ambivalent. They're just like flooding you with emotion or flooding you with words. And sometimes, especially if you're partnered with, there's an ambivalent and avoidant, the avoidant just gets completely overwhelmed. Like
Mhm.
they can't handle the emotionality, and they shut down even more because there's so many words they can't track it. They just get like lost. So that dynamic needs to be understood so they don't, distance from each other and lose the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in that healing, so you mentioned kind of like what someone can do to support this person.
Right.
Whether it's to say I'm here, it's consistent, or like take a break, it's okay.
Yeah.
Where is it? And this is a tricky question, but where is it the responsibility of the person with the attachment injury? And
It's always the responsibility of the person with the attachment injury. I mean, you can't do somebody else's homework, but you can not make it harder. You
Mhm.
know, Ideally, in an ideal scenario, and it's not always like this because you might have one partner that's really interested in healing and another partner that's like, I'm fine, leave me alone. It's want to deal with it at all.
Well, it's like untimely me alone.
Yeah, I mean, that's more of an avoidance stance.
Yeah.
But it's not everybody. I mean, it's great when people are open to the healing process, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So there's pain involved, and I get it. But if both people are interested, and like both people read a book about it, or both people get some knowledge about it from wherever they get it, and they're interested, then there's so much can happen in a relatively short period of time. But if you have one person working their own history and becoming more securely attached will be helpful. They say the research on that is that if you're in a relationship and you have an insecure, whatever it is, and you're with a person who's either started out secure or learned and earned secure, that usually you will move towards secure if you're in a relationship with them for like 1.5 to 2 years. Because every time you're doing something that's coming from insecure, they're responding to you from secure. And eventually it pulls you towards secure. But that doesn't mean I don't want anybody to hear it like, okay, you have to do all the work. That's not really fair. It's just that you moving to secure, whether your partner or somebody you care about does or doesn't, it's good for you regardless, because all of your relationships will get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's worth it. But you don't want to get into falling into that idea that I can heal everything. I can make it all better. That's not really fair.
Yes. Okay, what about disorganized? I find that to be the trickiest, and I find that I identify with that one, and I think most of the listeners of this podcast do too.
Well, disorganized is the most difficult because it has so much unresolved trauma mixed in with it. So you have the attachment system trying to attach, but the trauma history, feeling that, oh, relationships are dangerous, or I need to get out of here, or I need to fight against it, or I'm freeze, it's scary. Because, connection involves vulnerability. And a lot of times if we have situational or chronic disorganized attachment, it can go more to the extremes of avoidance. So when we hit that, it triggers us into a lot of ghosting or isolation. It can be disorganized, tilted a little bit more towards ambivalent. So when we hit the disorganization where the threat gets activated, it can trigger a lot of emotional volatility, a lot of insecurity, a lot of fear of abandonment, or feeling really abandoned and distraught and desperate about that. But disorganized, basically, the reason it's disorganized is the parents, if we look at it from that lens, the parents were scary too much of the time. They had scary behaviors, whether yelling, hitting, abuse, whatever it was. If it's consistent, that you tend to have chronic disorganization. If was sort of situational, like maybe when one parent got super stressed or drank too much or whatever, they got angry and would yell a lot, then maybe only when loud noises happen does it trigger the dissociation, disconnection, fragmentation that might happen with disorganized. So you're really if you're taking this on to work with it, which I have that history. There is interesting statistic in research that most therapists or caregivers have some incident of unresolved trauma in their like a disorganized experience in their history.
Yeah. Makes sense. You teach best with what you most need to learn.
Yeah, and in the effort to heal ourselves, and we get good at it, and then we become, involved in helping other people, which is, one way we go to early university, right, is by living the bad example experience. Yes. But separating, what I find really helpful is separating, you have this over association of the threat response and the attachment system. So trying to give the attachment system a safe place to land, like who are your resources? Who represents secure attachment to you? Who are the people that you feel relaxed around, that you can feel close to, they feel safe with? Safety is a big word for in disorganized. You want to help a person come back into the embodiment of physiological and emotional safety. And sometimes that's a lot of work, because maybe somebody grew up in such terrifying circumstances, they don't even know what safety feels like. So that's step one, if that's the situation. And then really taking the troubling behavior and working with the defensive orienting responses towards the difficult behaviors or that sort of thing. So when I'm working with the threat response, I always say to people, there's part of you probably that it feels love for your parent, that we don't want to mess with that. That's a good thing. Just keep that. But they also had this troubling behavior. It's whatever it was, hitting, yelling, something not good. And I just want you to put that troubling behavior. So I don't say put the parent this far away from you. I say, take the troubling behavior, whatever that was, and imagine it as far away as your body needs it to be, like that the body decide on the distance, right? So we're interviewing the body and its reaction to threat. And then freeze framing that disturbing behavior as far away as the body needs it to be. Some people want it close so they can keep an eye on it. Some people want it on the edge of the ever-expanding universe, as far away as possible, but they have to locate it. Even if they can't see the person, they have to make it a red dot or a black cloud or a lightning bolt or whatever they want to have it represent. But they have to locate, because the threat response is so dependent on location for survival, right? We have to locate threat before we can evaluate what to do with it, whether to run towards it and fight, or whether to run away from it to escape, or freeze and go still to not be noticed, whatever our body decides. And then I have them, now that the threatening behavior is stopped and immobilized, and sometimes they go a little further, they put them in a block of ice or in one of those English phone booths that I don't know if they still have now that we have cell phones, but it's something where that behavior is contained in a way that won't be harmful. They're experiencing it not as harmful. And then I ask them, what would your body want to do or say in response to that threat? And we're trying to go from passive responses to active responses so we can complete the defensive orienting, right? And sometimes things happen to them so young that they don't even feel like they can, even when the threat is immobilized, they don't feel like they can do anything. Then I bring in like a competent protector. Who would you like to have defend you, or what would you like to see them do? And then watch that movie of your competent protector taking your parent to anger management classes, or taking you away and saying you're never going to treat this child this way again, or saying, this is wrong, you can't do this to this child, or whatever they want to see happen that wasn't there. And then also to allow space for the connecting gestures. Like a lot of times when the defensive ones are evoked and completed, then a lot of times, and they don't always happen in this order, but the person starts to feel like they want to be close to someone, or maybe and I often direct that need for closeness to someone outside the family. Like maybe, or it might be an aunt that was safe, or an uncle that was safe, or a grandparent they felt close to, or a teacher, or a spiritual teacher, or whatever, to try to let their attachment system have a safe place to land. I mean, if I'm in a in-person group when I'm teaching, I'll have people actually do an ally oasis, where they just pick people out of the crowd, whether they know them or not, but they just get a sense that they're safe, and have them in their direct line of vision while they're working. So even though what they're working with threat, they also can look and see these supportive people besides, I mean, I'm hopefully a supportive person too, but they can also see other people, and their attachment systems getting nourished in an unconflicted way. They aren't dealing with threat in those relationships. So it helps the attachment system.
Or a cartoon character, do you think? Like cartoon character that felt very safe in childhood to connect with?
Sure. Yeah, why not? And sometimes in terms of competent protectors, I even let them go to, I suggest, well, it could be a Marvel character. I mean, I don't know, Giant Hulk, or Batman, or Spider-Man, or Wonder Woman is the one that comes up a lot in my sessions with people, because she had that lasso of truth, so you could lasso the person. So your perpetrator would have to tell the truth. I think that's very attractive to a lot of us.
So if someone is listening to this and they maybe haven't had such extreme childhoods with abuse and scream, verbal abuse, physical abuse, could they still have disorganized attachment?
Well, the main way you can tell if disorganization has happened, if the person has difficulty with dissociation, or they experience relationships as threatening, like they get to a certain level of intimacy and then this terror comes up. The other way you can tell is people's speech patterns. So if people talk and they start a sentence, and in the middle of it, they just stop, and there's a gap, and then they can't go back to it, right? It's gone. And then they start and stop, start and stop. There's this gapping out in language, so that the story is usually a little hard to follow because you don't get the complete sentence, when you're experiencing that with someone, that usually indicates they've hit a pocket of disorganization, because we develop our language skills the same time that we're developing our attachment relationship blueprint. We're learning to talk the same time we're dealing with whatever we're dealing with. So an avoidant, because they're shutting their attachment system down, that's why they have very few words. They just say very little, like yes, no, the way they tell you to answer when you're doing a deposition, and then the ambivalent responds verbally by being overly verbal. I mean, this pressure, I've had so many people say to me, I can't be around that person, they talk so much. I said, yeah, but you need to understand, they do, and that's difficult sometimes, but that pressure to speak is coming from trying to stabilize the relationship. So if you say things that stabilize it, like, oh, you're such a good friend, I really appreciate you, then that can usually relax a little bit. You need to say something.
Regulation.
Yeah, it's trying to understand the need behind the behavior that might be challenging. Yeah.
And for someone who has disorganized attachment, how do they show up in relationships, for example, around conflict, specifically around conflict and repair? What happens in their bodies and how are they showing up?
Well, I can't speak to anybody's internal experience, but generally, what is a lot of dysregulation
Mm.
and fragmentation. So if someone's in disorganized, it's really important to emphasize safety and also pacing, to slow things down and regulate yourself in the presence of someone who's dysregulated. That will help them regulate. Um, but even timeouts, what are, like, okay, I can see you're really upset right now. So maybe it's good to let's just put this on hold and we'll revisit it in half an hour or something, or later today or tomorrow morning or whatever. Um, the the importance is feeling protected. Like, I mean, even just saying to somebody, like, well, what would help you feel safe right now? In their when they're feeling very unsafe, just orienting towards what's going to be easier to repair. Conflict is hard because that people tend to feel it as attack, and it's important not to communicate through attack, obviously. But when you're in your defensive operating, you're not in the part of the brain that cares about relationships. So the first thing is get into the part of the brain that cares about relationships. Otherwise, you're never going to work anything out. Because once the defensive structures are taking over, like in the amygdala and the reptilian brain, you just want to fight. So your brain is telling you to fight. So the person's saying whatever's conflictual, and all you want to do is duke it out. Or you want to run away and slam the door. That's another defensive orienting strategy, right? Like, get the heck out of here. It's the flight response. Or it's so overwhelming, you just freeze and you can't talk at all. You're just immobile. So um, so working through those stuck defensive responses or calming the threat response is really important before you try to do any relational work, because you're not in the right part. When you're in that part of the brain, it actually shuts down the medial prefrontal cortex where social engagement lives, where the part of us that wants to be authentically connected to our true self and feels the impulse at times to connect to somebody else in an authentic way, that's not online. It's for most people, as soon as they go into the defensive orienting, that's gone. So you want to either complete those responses or calm those responses, or nurture the person in a way where they feel safe enough that they can then go up into the prefrontal cortex. If you think of Stephen Porges, it's like safety. That's why he talks about safety so much. It'll take you to the prefrontal cortex, ventral vagal in his language. And you'll want to work things out in the relationship. But disorganized has the hardest time to get there because they have so much unresolved trauma. And so dealing with the unresolved trauma can be what needs to happen first. And I think ideally getting some help from someone who's attachment informed and trauma informed can be super helpful. But even if your partner's pretty good at it, that's great. We do a lot of healing in our relationships because we're with the person a lot more than we're with our therapist, if we have one. So you don't have to have a therapist. But I think if with disorganized, it would probably be a easier journey with someone who understands all of this from an attachment and a trauma perspective, to just make the journey easier. I mean, why have it be hard? It needs to be, if it's possible. Not everybody wants to do that or, feels open to that. I mean, there's a lot you can do from reading books and, we're trying to put out a lot of information that's helpful, that's practical. And, it's not the easiest territory for lots of us. So it's helpful to get help, I think.
So would you say that it helps when your partner kind of notices that you're in that state, the unsafe state, and they reach out and say, what do you need? And it's also helpful when you can recognize, like, I'm triggered now. I need
this, yeah,
or I need whatever it is, right? Both of those at the same time.
Yeah. And the more we can trust our partners to respond in a regulated way, hopefully. I mean, if you have two disorganized people together in a relationship, which of course happens occasionally, one of them goes off on the disorganized at a time. If they both do it at the same time, that's kind of deadly. So
yeah, can you talk about that? I had written that down as a question. What happens when people sort of go into this vortex where they're just triggering one another?
This is a funny thing to say, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to set your smartphone up to film it and watch it later, because it's a disaster. And to see, well, okay, what could I have done differently? Could I have emphasize safety? Could I call for a timeout? Could I, what regulates me? Could petting my dog while we're talking, help? What helps? It's too much when both people are in their unresolved trauma at the same time, because they tend to just go into attack mode. It's not a pretty thing. So
Mhm.
being able to see that, because the other thing is, because of the dissociation, they often don't remember what they said or what they did. That's why I'm suggesting a smartphone filming once in a while that you both agree to ahead of time, just to see, oh, wow, yeah, I really went after you there, and, that wasn't fair. And I brought up everything that happened in the last 10 years instead of just staying focused on, what we're dealing with now. Just to be able to kind of dissect it and kind of, what could I do differently there that would be helpful, not so harmful? Could I think
Mhm.
helpful? And maybe even showing that to a couples therapist if you felt like, you know, called to
Mhm.
do that. There's there's so much we can do, but people have this idea, tell me if you think this is true, that you should just know how to do relationship, without any training or not any acknowledging that maybe you came from a family that was pretty out there, did some really egregious things. We get imprinted with all that, and then we sort of have this like um, Bonnie Badenoch calls it obligatory projection. You're living in that projection so much. So much is getting projected on your partner, and you're uh, being projected on as well. So you're not even necessarily dealing with each other half the time. So just
Dealing with also like your parents, right? I mean, you're
yeah,
becoming how they were because that's the example. So if you're
right.
a good example, yeah, it will be easy. I think, but
Well, and people often say, "I never want to be like my mother," but then it happens. You just go, "Oh, and that was a mother move. I just did a really big major mother move on that one." It's in us. So it's like if we don't acknowledge it and we don't work with it, it tends to take the front seat sometimes.
absolutely. And you know how we tend to, I really like Terry Real, and he always says we marry our unfinished business.
Yeah, right.
And so we tend to do that, right? So we attract a partner that is very similar to, or reminds us or brings up in us, you know, this trauma. And
Right.
so I think it can be really hard to know, like, should I leave this relationship? Is it actually very unhealthy for me, or is it just my triggers? This is a question, I know that it's not black or white, but I'm just so curious what you would say on that.
Well, I mean, that's a very individual decision for people, and I would never tell somebody to leave or not leave, or, that's so important for the person to make themselves. But I think one way of thinking about it is am I willing to do the work, and is my partner seem to be willing to do the work? And if we give ourselves some time, are we seeing things improve? Are we understanding each other more? But sometimes as you get more intimate in a relationship over time, more of the history shows up because it's safe enough. So it can even open the door for more unresolved stuff. But I mean, I'm biased. I'm a therapist, and I also partake of the profession. I've been in the client seat, whether it's my spiritual teachers or other people. I just think that examining these things, it's hard to do it all by yourself. I mean, people can, and to the extent that that works, and sometimes books help it, and these kinds of things help it. But I just think if you're having a big struggle, like on the level of disorganized attachment, it would be really helpful to get someone in your corner that really understands it and can help you see what the options are, what behaviors could be worked
Mhm.
out better. I mean, how you each regulate each other. How do you enter into a relationship feeling like, okay, I want to protect myself and feel safe, but I also want to protect the person I'm in love with to make sure they feel safe. And I don't do things like threaten divorce or threaten I'm going to leave or threaten that I'm going to get violent or, things that we might have seen in our histories, that we understand how devastating those kinds of things are. And then, but we might also feel the impulse to act them out because we were subject to them so much. So, like, to try to find a way to move through that territory. And I think really getting people threat responses last way too long, and to help a person really quiet their threat response will make it so much easier for them to shift out of negative and damaging behaviors. I mean, people are often trying to heal or stop things in themselves before they've really dealt with the threat that they've embodied. And that's just hard. It's so much easier if you really come out of the threat. You do, finish, evoke, and complete the threat responses, and have resourcing around it and have a competent protector installed, all these different things we do in our work, then you don't, it's more than like trying to control our behavior. I'm really trying to go deeper than that to like extinguish the impulse to go into those really negative behaviors. So you're not having to stop the impulse, you're actually extinguishing the impulse.
Mhm.
And you're not constantly at war with yourself. Like, well, why can't I have a conversation whenever it's on this topic and not go to yelling? And why can't, you just beat yourself up, but that doesn't help. That's hurtful. Like, we don't need more pain. You've already got enough pain.
Yeah, it makes me also think of, when we're attracted to people that are not super healthy. And then when we work on the past stuff and the trauma, then our attraction even changes and what we bring into our life changes, right? And when people do things that are harmful, it's actually like, ooh, it's a turnoff.
Yeah. 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 Because then you've really successfully broken the pattern. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I love that.
Healing is worth it. I mean, I speak from that stance because I've spent most of my life working on it. So I personally think it's really worth it. And most of my clients, I think, would agree that they feel like taking the journey. We're all on this journey. I mean, we're all on this crazy human journey that's challenging. I mean, just as hard. It's hard sometimes. And just don't want to make it sound easy because sometimes it can be really challenging. I remember one of my closest friends at the time, really did something, kind of a major betrayal, and I just could not get over it. I was having a hard time. I was having anger dreams or rage. I mean, it's just like so unlike me. I was just like, wow, I am really upset about this. And I kept thinking, okay, whatever happened there, whatever she seemed to have done, I it must have triggered something much deeper because the reaction is so strong. So I started getting off making a story about, a case against her and shifted my energy to like, what's going on with you that this is so upsetting and so painful and you're reacting in such a really strong way. And the more I stayed focused on that, it was still like a blind spot. It went on for like 6 months. I remember I was just like, what's
Wow.
going on with me? What is the deal? And I just couldn't see it. I knew I was really upset. I knew I was really angry. I made space for all that, but I could not see what the deal was. And then but I stayed with it, and I did work with my teachers. Nothing went anywhere. I was just like feeling like, okay, I'm maybe this way forever. I don't know. It's like, whoa. And finally, I woke up one morning feeling all of this self-love, just this incredible self-love. And I went, okay, now I get it. It was hitting my wound of not understanding. I mean, I was sort of okay being loving out there, but I wasn't loving towards myself. I didn't grow up in an environment that supported that idea at all. And so it was always kind of critical and violent and stuff. So then I started having access to this self-love, and then I was grateful that somebody triggered it because the end of the story was, oh, okay, I have much more access to that now. But it took, oh man, I was having a hard time, like really serious hard time for at least 6 months. And I kept thinking, man, something is really, but the curiosity kind of has to go in the right direction. Like, I think I would have maybe never gotten there if I just demonized this other person and, just vented all my anger on them and all that. I mean, they did do something that was definitely not cool. But given that, okay, yeah, that's true. But my reaction was so strong. I thought, okay, you need to look at yourself here. What is this associating to? It's something big. But I couldn't see it till I saw it. And I was like, oh, okay. Made perfect sense backwards.
Yeah, I love that you're sharing that because it can be, first of all, I mean, that this is your life's work. Like, I love that people can hear that because I also totally identify with the hardship of this and having those blind spots because we're wired. Like, literally, our entire body is wired for something and it's just so automatic. Like, it took me forever to sense that I totally shut down in a lot of situations and I don't even feel like sharing my need. I don't even have needs. It was like, what?
Right. What needs? Yeah.
That's a thing. I have needs. I have feelings. So it's like even accessing that it was so interesting to notice like there's no access to it. And that awareness was even hard to come by.
Yes. I mean, it's really true. It's defenses are defenses. They're called that for a reason. I mean, they like keep you unaware you're defending against something as soon as you know what you're defending against. It's like, what is going on with me? And every part of my intention was to be curious and open to whatever it was, but man, I couldn't see it. It was like,
Yeah.
it's tough, man. I can't see this to save my life,
Yeah. And that example is
You know?
it's such a good example because we can hold like both truths that yeah, somebody did something hurtful, and also like I'm having a huge trigger that is mine. So like both things are true, because often it goes back to that question, right? Like is my boundary being crossed, or am I just triggered? What about both?
Yeah, yeah. I think, further along we get in this journey, it seems like a couple things happen that I've noticed with a lot of people, myself included, is your inner critic gets quieter. Like you don't tend to judge yourself as much, and you also find yourself not judging other people the way you might have in earlier times. It's you just sort of understand. You come out at things from more of an understanding, compassion, and perspective most of the time, not all the time, but more. And the other, yeah, and the other thing is lessening reactivity, and then something that's unintegrated gets hit, and your reactivity skyrockets. But now when I have a really strong reactive moment, it's like a neon for me. I go, wow, what's that about? And I get curious because I've done this journey so many times. Like, oh, okay, it must have hit something unresolved in me because man, I am blazing, I'm like really reacting. But over time, as there's more healing, I think there's less and less reactivity. I mean, you're reacting with discernment, but you're not reacting with all the emotional volatility. It's different, there's something that happens when secure attachment gets a bit more hold, I think. And it doesn't mean it stays all the time, because then you hit something hard and then all that's out the window sometimes too. But you can usually recover faster. That's why I think it's valuable to do the inner working for yourself, but it will deeply impact all your relationships, which is also a big benefit. But even just if you're talking about your relationship with yourself, you have a much more enjoyable life if you've been able to move with some of these things with curiosity and compassion versus criticism and contempt and blame and shame and all the other stuff that we can easily get into.
So true. Thank you so much for this conversation. How can people work with you? I read your book. I loved it. There's so many amazing practices in there.
Oh, that's the main thing. I tried to make it practical. Yeah.
Awesome. What are some of the ways that people can enjoy your work?
Well, we have a website, traumasolutions.com, and there's a free attachment quiz on there that I suggest people take just, to play around with it. It's fun to take quizzes. But also, you want to take it from the perspective of not your best day, like maybe you're feeling out of sorts, because that'll help you be a little clear on what your default attachment system is. And the other way to take that quiz is one relationship at a time. So if you're thinking about your father, take it that way, and take it again. It's free. It doesn't matter. And then take it again for your mother, with your mother in mind, or your partner in mind, or maybe an ex-partner in mind, or a child, or whoever, person at work, doesn't matter. But just to be focused on how am I in this relationship, because different relationships pull us different directions. And understand that you'll probably get some feedback from the questionnaire that you have a mix, a certain percentage of secure, avoidant, anxious, or disorganized. And some people have a little bit of in all of them. I mean, we all have a mix. That's normal. It's okay. It just means that you have an influence from those different perspectives in you. And then the quiz usually gives you some feedback, some written material on the different attachment styles, so that's helpful. We have an introduction to attachment course in our store that goes more in depth about what I've been talking today. That's inexpensive, and that's a nice thing to have to review and maybe listen to with your friends or partner, so that you're on the same page. You can do the same thing with the book. The book's Power of Attachment. I have a CD series. If you're more auditory, it's called Healing Your Attachment Wounds. They're both published by Sounds True. I'm just finishing a Sounds True workbook, which will have even 50 more, at least 50 exercises, but it probably won't be out for a year. So that's a little bit of a teaser on that one. It's not out for a year. But there are other books on attachment that are really good. The courses we have, you're welcome to take a look at. They're on our website. We have our different podcasts and webinars on the website if you want to check things out a little bit more. Some of it might be on YouTube. We're trying to make this information as available as possible because I really think it has the power, I've seen this over and over again, to change our personal lives, but also to change our relationships in community, our relationships at work. I mean, I just feel like if everybody, including CEOs and leaders of countries, got into really trying to understand secure attachment, we could shift the human experience away from all this disaster uh, in 1 or 2 generations. But of course, that would take a major movement in that direction. But I'm trying to, all of us that are involved in my work and other people's work with attachment has become more available. I think we're trying to shift things in a really good direction. And it is powerful. It is.
Yeah, very. Oh, we didn't even get to the generation stuff.
Okay. But I'll be talking about that a lot.
You do so much. Like I get your emails and there's so much amazing content. I mean, it's unbelievable how much energy you have and how much you do. So please, everyone, like check out all these resources. They're amazing and powerful. And yeah, thank you so, so, so much.
You're welcome. And I want to thank my team because my team helps me get all that out there. They're really amazing. And if you want our newsletters or whatever, you can just go on the website and I think fill in a email or something, and if that's interesting to you. But thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody listening.
Thank you, Diane.